Hello, my little ducklings. It is I, Rick Stevenson, aka Rick, but you may call me Cool Kid Rick for short. And today we're here to discuss why 0 factorial equals 1. So, most of you already know that 0 factorial equals 1. Now, before we go into why 0 factorial equals 1, let's first define what a factorial is. For those of you who don't know, a factorial of a number, let's say n, is equal to that number times 1 minus that number times 2 minus that number times 3 minus that number dot times 1. So it is essentially just the number times the number less than it times the number less than that times the number less than that all the way up till 1. Now for example, 5 factorial is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, and that is equal to 120. That is what a factorial is. Now, what happens when you have 0 factorial? Well, let's take a look. 4 factorial is equal to 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is equal to 24. 3 factorial is equal to 3 times 2 times 1, which is equal to 6. 2 factorial is equal to 2 times 1, which is equal to 2, and 1 factorial is equal to 1. Well, it's essentially just 1. 0 factorial. What is 0 factorial? It's not very intuitive, but one way we could figure out how 0 factorial equals 1 is by creating a sequence. Now, to give you an example of a sequence, it is the same way we find out how a to the 0 equals 1. So let's take for example 5 to the 3 equals 125. 5 to the 2 equals 25. 5 to the 1 equals 5. 5 to the 0. Now what does that equal? So what we can see is that there's a pattern. 5 to the 2 is just 5 to the 3 divided by 5. And 5 to the 2 is just 5 to the 5 to the 1 is just 5 to the 2 divided by 5. So 5 to the 0 should just be 5 to the 1 divided by 5. So 5 divided by 5 is equal to 1. And this works for all numbers. Let's take 8, or let's take 3 for example. So 3 to the 3, that's 27. 3 to the 2 equals 9. 3 to the 1 equals 3. And 3 to the 0 equals, well, let's see the pattern. The pattern is 3 to the 3 divided by 3 is equal to 3 to the 2. And 3 to the 2 divided by 3 is equal to 3 to the 1. So 3 to the 1 divided by 3, 3 divided by 3 is equal to 1. Hence, we have proved that a to the 0 equals 1. So let's try and form a similar sort of sequence to figure out how 0 factorial equals 1. So let's start off the sequence over here. 5 factorial, as we have discussed, 5 factorial is just 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Now what happens when we divide 5 factorial by 5? Well, divide both sides of the equation by 5. and you get 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which you may realize is just 4 factorial. So 4, let's move on to 4 factorial and divide that by 4. That is just 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 divided by 4. And now you see that it's just 3 factorial, 3 times 2 times 1. Okay, now we're starting to see a little bit of a pattern, but let's confirm this. 3 factorial divided by 3 is equal to 3 times 2 times 1 divided by 3 equals 2 times 1, which is 2 factorial. So now we're starting to see a solid pattern. Let's continue this pattern. 2 factorial divided by 2 is equal to 2 times 1 divided by 2, which is just 1 factorial. And now, the moment of truth, 1 factorial divided by 1. What is 1 factorial divided by 1? That is just 1 divided by 1. Now, let's take a look at the sequence so far. So, what we've had is when we divide the number factorial divided by the number itself, you get the factorial of the number that's 1 less than it. So 5 factorial divided by 5 is 4. 4 factorial divided by 4 is 3 factorial. 3 factorial divided by 3 is 2 factorial. 2 factorial divided by 1 is 1 factorial. 1 factorial divided by 1 should equal 0 factorial. So that is just 1 divided by 1, and you get 0 factorial equals 1. And that is one way to prove that 0 factorial equals 1 by forming a series like this. That's all for today, guys. See you later in the next videos.